Shalom, peace and blessings, family. In this video, I will be talking about dreadlocks in the Bible. What? Dreadlocks in the Bible? Yes, fam. Dreadlocks in the Bible. P.S. Don't get too mad at me when I use the term dreads and dreadlocks, because I will be using that term a lot in this video. Because I know a lot of people want to comment and say, why do you say dreadlocks? Our hair is not dreadful. There's nothing dreadful about our beautiful locks. Well, I really understand what you're trying to say, but you must understand the true origin of the term dreadlocks. It does not mean that your hair is dreadful. It just means that the people who had the hair were dreadful. Allow me to explain. The term originated in the 15 and 1600s in the Caribbean islands where slaves were dropped off. And when the French went back to the island to make the slaves farm for sugarcane, there was many rebellion and atrocities being committed. Now, don't forget that there was the Haitian Rebellion, which the Haitians revolted and started hanging and killing the French and doing everything the French did to them in return, then chasing the French out of the island with their voodoo practices. Then you had the Maroons of Jamaica who started to shoot and kill and slay a lot of the French. And then you had the original Rastaman who would slit your throat in a second. So the French named these people dreads because of their personality, not because of their hair. Even though they did have dreadlocks, they named their hair dreadlocks because they were simply the locks of the people who were dreadful. It does not mean that their hair itself was dreadful. This is talking about their personality. They were dreadful. But let's get back on topic. We're talking about dreadlocks in the Bible. If I were to just put locks in the Bible, certain people would think I'm talking about a lock and a key, but no, I'm talking about hair. So, dreadlocks in the Bible. Are dreadlocks in the Bible? Are dreadlocks associated with the Bible? What does dreadlocks have to do with the Bible? In this video, I will be talking about all of that and more. So stay tuned. First, I will answer this question. Are dreadlocks in the Bible? Yes, dreadlocks are in fact in the Bible. Not only are they in the Bible, they are literally the only hairstyle ever mentioned in the Bible. No other hairstyle is mentioned in the Bible. No afros, no fades, no waves, nothing of that nature is mentioned in the Bible. Now, why did I only name Afrocentric hairstyles? Well, that's simply because it's a proven fact that the Israelites, the people of the Bible, the Israelites, the Hebrews, were a Negro people. It's a proven fact. It's not a superstition. It's not an opinion. It's not a personal belief. You can go research it if you don't believe me. It's a proven fact that the Hebrews, Israelites, they were and still are to this day a Negro people. Okay, I will be giving archaeological evidence, what they look like, their hair, their skin color, all of that in this video, so stay tuned. But we're going to get right into it. But first, let me just say this. If you search in your Bible, you won't even find the word brush, comb, or pick mentioned, because the ancient Hebrews did not use brushes, combs, and picks. They might have used them on their kids occasionally, but they wasn't using it a lot, like we use them today. Most of them had locks in their hair. Not all of them. Most of them did. The priests didn't have locks. The priests pulled their hair. But pretty much everyone else had locks, especially the kings had locks. I'll be talking about that as well. But let's get right into it. We're going to the book of Numbers chapter 6 and verse 5. So, the book of Numbers chapter 6 verse 5. This chapter is talking about the vow of a Nazarite. Now, if you don't know what the vow of a Nazarite is, it's this. When an Israelite wanted to separate himself and make himself more holy to the Most High, what he would do is he would make a vow to the Most High to never cut his hair until his vow is over with. Like if he wanted to make the vow of a Nazarite for 5 years, 10 years, or even 2 years or 1 year, then he could not cut his hair, trim it, or edge it up until his vow is over with. Okay? Also, he couldn't drink any alcoholic beverage. He couldn't eat any grapes or anything that grows off a vine. And he could not touch a dead body. We're going to go to the book of Numbers chapter 6 and verse 5. We're going to talk about these locks, these Nazarite locks. And a lot of people in Africa still have Nazarite locks. The Rastas have Nazarite locks. And the reason Rastas such as Bob Marley grew their locks is because they made the vow of a Nazarite. We're going to go to the book of Numbers chapter 6 and verse 5. All the days of the vow of his separation, there shall no razor come upon his head. That means he should not shave off anything on his head until the days be fulfilled in which he separateth himself unto the Lord. He shall be holy and shall let the locks of his hair grow. So the Bible is telling you, if you want to be an Israelite, you have to let, my bad. The Bible is telling you, if you want to be a Nazarite, you have to let the locks of your hair grow. But a lot of people were conditioned to believe that locks of hair looks like this. Loose, straight strands of hair. That is not a lock. The hair itself has to be intertwined and locked up for it to be a lock of hair. Even if we look up the definition of a lock, you would see what I mean. Even though this definition doesn't really apply to hair itself, it can still be used by context clues to figure out what the term locks and dreadlocks mean. We can look up locks in the definition. 1. A mechanism for keeping a door, lid, etc. fastened. Now the word fasten means to close, not allowing anything to get in or out. If you look at this hair, it is not closed, it is not intertwined, and you can get anything in or out of this hair. It's so loose, you can put a pencil right through it and just go back and forth. Look at this. You see these girls with this straight, wavy hair that's not locked up at all? It's just loose. And they can put their fingers right through and just run all the way down their backs with their fingers. How is that locked? It's not a lock at all. So it's basically not a lock. Now let's talk about Samson. Samson, if you don't know the story about Samson, here it is. Samson was a Nazarite from birth. Out of his mother's womb, he was a Nazarite, and he was never allowed to cut or trim his hair. He grew out his locks since he was a baby, even to the time he was a grown man, and throughout his entire life. And eventually, the Most High used him to be a stronghold to fight the Philistines. And he was so strong, he killed hundreds of men in his lifetime. Hundreds of Philistines who were oppressing and enslaving the Israelites. And the Philistines were trying to find out, why was Samson so strong? So they sent a spy woman out named Delilah to find out why Samson was so strong, so they can get rid of whatever made Samson so strong. And eventually Samson fell in love with Delilah, but Delilah was still trying to deceive Samson. And Delilah found out that it was Samson's hair that caused him to be so strong. So she sent a man to cut off Samson's 7 locks in his sleep. So let's read the book of Judges chapter 16 verse 19. And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. So Samson only has 7 locks on his head. Only 7. But if locks look like this, straight and loose, how can you only have 7? We have been conditioned since kindergarten and first grade. They've given us stories like Goldilocks, a little European girl with straight hair, but she didn't have not 1 lock in her head. If locks look like this, then how can you only have 7 of them? You can't even point out 1 individual lock, because this is not a lock. If you were to shake that, the parts would change on their own. So Samson only has 7 locks. So let's think about this for a second. This is a picture of Denzel Curie. Denzel Curie's locks come very close to what Samson's locks could have looked like, simply because Denzel Curie also has 7 locks on his head. Look, there's 5 showing in the front, and there is 2 all the way in the back that we cannot see. 5 plus 2 equals 7. Denzel Currie has 7 locks, just like Samson. So, yeah, and also these locks resemble Samson's locks because Samson had sun bleached locks. Samson's locks were in the sun his entire life, and Samson lived in a climate where the sun always beat down on them, and his name actually means sunlight. And look, if we go to the etymology and the Hebrew definition of Samson, it reads Shimshon. Shimshon is the Hebrew name for Samson. Since the Bible was originally written in Hebrew, it says sunlight. Now, the Hebrews named their children after they were born, and Samson was an Israelite, and he was named after he was born. And his parents named him Shimshon, which means sunlight, because ever since he was a baby, he played around in the sun. This means Samson must have had very dark skin and very bright and light locks. Just like Denzel Curry's, because Denzel Curry's locks appear to be bleached, sun bleached in the sun. When you go in the sun for a long time and you have locks in your head, the sun will naturally bleach your locks. This process is called reverse melanation. It's a natural process and it's a chemical reaction that is natural. Now, this played a minor role in why Samson was very strong. Basically, when a natural chemical reaction happens in your body, it is always converted into mechanical energy. Just like if we ate an apple, the apple is filled with chemical energy. If we ate that apple and consumed it, it will later be transverted into mechanical energy that makes us move around and walk around and run around, right? But chemical energy that is natural is different from artificial chemical reaction or artificial chemical energy that we get from dyes and bleaches and Clorox and all this other stuff. The sun is practically the mother of energy on Earth. And when we get chemical reactions from the sun, it will also be transverted into mechanical energy that makes you move around and strong and everything. And basically, that's one reason why he's so strong. The main reason is when you have locks, your hair curls up and coils up way more than it would if you were combing your hair. And notice this, a coil transfers energy far more efficiently than a straight wire would. Now, if you were to take a coil and wrap it around a battery, it will create a electromagnet that is 10 times more powerful than that battery if it did not have the coil around it. Because simply coils transvert, electricity. Also understand that there is electricity moving through our bodies right now in our nerves. This is what makes us be able to feel things and get up and walk around and run around. And there's nerves all throughout our body and they stem from our brains. And if our nerves stopped working and there was no electricity flowing through those nerves, we would not be able to move that body part. That is called being paralyzed. But understand this, our hair is an extension of our nervous system. But because there are obviously no muscles in our hair cannot move on its own. But there are still nerves in our hair, and electricity still can be transferred through our hair. That's why when we touch something that is electric, our hair will stand up because it is an extension of our nervous system. And understand that this also played a big role in why Samson was so strong. But the main reason he was so strong is because the Most High used him, and he was a spiritual man, and the Most High is the creator of all, and he can do all. But let's move on. Let's talk about King Solomon. King Solomon, King Shalomo. King Shlomo means the king of peace in Hebrew. So we're talking about King Solomon. But the thing is, whenever I talk about, oh, the Hebrews were dark skinned, then people always want to get in my comment section and show me this. Look, they weren't dark skinned because look at this. It says he's white and he's ruddy. King Solomon was white and ruddy. Well, pay attention and understand this. The King James Version Bible was translated from the Hebrew Tanakh that was written in Hebrew. So it was translated from Hebrew to English. And Hebrew is a complicated language that still holds a few mysteries to this day. And when you translate anything from Hebrew, some words will be distorted and even changed. This word was probably changed, maybe even purposely. The word white shouldn't even be there. It should not say my beloved is white. Actually, the word white in Hebrew is Laban. It said Zok. It said my beloved is Zok. Now the word Zok means dazzling in Hebrew. So it should say, my beloved is dazzling and ruddy. And if you look up the definition of ruddy, it will say a red complexion. But that's not always the case, because when you see white people and they're in the sun, they turn red. But the thing is, the true definition of ruddy is a brownish red. If you were to look up a picture of a ruddy duck or a ruddy horse or a brick, you will see that these objects are ruddy and they are brownish red. I myself am ruddy. I'm brown, but I have a tint of red on my skin, and this was the same color of King Solomon, dazzling and ruddy. And verse 11 says, his head is as the most fine gold. This is because of his crown and his riches. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. So this is talking about his locks, his dreadlocks, his dreads on his head are bushy and black as a raven. Now, when you think of bushy black locks, this is what should come to mind in your head. Shout out to Zayloc23. This is a picture of him. The link to his channel is in my description. Zayloc23 has wisdom, man. You can learn it too from just listening to this man speak. If you want to get some knowledge, apply it from him and transfer it into wisdom. But don't forget that the best wisdom comes from the scriptures and comes from the Most High himself. And when you apply that knowledge, you will get extreme amounts of wisdom. But look at Zayloc's locks. As you can see, they are black and they are bushy and black as a raven. So, could King Solomon's locks have looked like this? Absolutely. Obviously, because that's how he was described. Also, shout out to beautiful sister, Natural Nirvana. As you can see, her locks are black and bushy and black as a raven. The link to her channel is also in my description. She gives lock tips, lock advice. If you want to start dreadlocks of your own, or if you already have locks, if you want to learn a thing or two, you could just go to her page and she gives a great advice. But look at her hair. As you can see, it is black and bushy, black as a raven, just how King Solomon locks was described. So, could King Solomon's lock look like this? Very so. Absolutely. So, it's context clues, observations, common sense. These things is what makes the scriptures come alive. Now, a lot of people want to deceive you and tell you that King Solomon or the other Israelites were Caucasian or European. Well, that's a lie, because if King Solomon was a European, if he was a Caucasian man and he had locks, this is what he would look like. Are these locks black and bushy as a raven? No. So could King Solomon look like this? No. Absolutely not. It's not like I have anything against white people with dreads. I have absolutely nothing against white people with locks. But I'll tell you this, King Solomon was not a white person with locks. Let's move on. If we read Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5, he says, I am black but comely, O you daughters of Jerusalem. Songs of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 11. This is his wife describing him. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. Let's move on. You can read about the vow of a Nazarite in Numbers chapter 6 and 5, where they grew their nappy dreadlocks out. And you can look at this archaeology here. This was a sculpture of an Israelite sculpted around 1300 BCE in Egypt. And look what he looks like. He has twisties all in his head. These are twisted locks. These are not freeform. Twisted locks were actually very popular in Egypt more than any other place on earth. Um, they weren't really freeforming too much in Egypt, basically just twisting. And both the Egyptians and the Israelites did it. Just like a white woman will walk around with blonde hair, and then a black woman will see that and do the same, simply because the oppressed naturally do things that the oppressor does. Um, it's basically it has a lot to do with, I should say, the oppressed trying to be like the oppressor. I don't know how it works, but it does. But it was very popular in Egypt, and you can tell that this Israelite is actually a Negro and not an Egyptian, because basically the Egyptians did not grow their full beards out. First of all, this was a Hebrew culture. I'm gonna repeat that. The Israelites did not, the Egyptians did not grow their full beards out. The Israelites did that. The Israelites grew their beards out, not the Egyptians. Because a lot of people can comment and say, how do you know that this is not a picture of an Egyptian with locks? Simply because the Egyptians didn't grow their full beards out. It was not their culture. The Hebrew slaves did it. Also, he has the headband on, and the Israelites did that. This is called a mitri or a frontlet. The Israelites did that as well. This is a picture of a Hebrew in Egypt with the twisty, with the locks. And what does he look like? He is a Negro. And the Egyptians were Negroes as well, but they were not the same type of Negro. They came from a different stock of Ham. And look at this. This is another picture of an ancient Hebrew with locks. This picture is a little funny because the color is very faded, almost like um almost like the rain probably washed it away. Because if you look at his headband, the blue is kind of faded, so it's not all the way blue. And look at his locks. You can tell that these are locks. And you can tell that he is a Negro because look at the hair texture of his beard. What does that look like? Does that look like straight hair, or does that look like matted up and nappy beard hair growing out of the sides of his cheeks? This picture cannot be confused with anyone of Caucasian or European descent. That's an obvious Negro with locks and with a nappy beard. Let's move on. You can still see the Israelites rocking the headband, rocking the mitri, rocking the frontlet. These are Israelites being exiled from Assyria in the Assyrian captivity, with their children being forced to leave the land. As you can see, they have twisted locks in their hair. And the Assyrian guards are forcing the Israelites to be exiled from the Assyrian land. This is the northern kingdom of the Israelites. This is archaeological evidence supporting what the Israelites look like. Look at their beards. As you can see, their beards are still very nappy, and these are drawn exaggeratively as any Negro that you would see when you walk up the street. And look at this. Again, in the Egyptian captivity, look at Pharaoh. Pharaoh is a black Egyptian. He's black, just like any other Egyptian. He has brown skin. But look at his face. Do you see a full beard on him? No, because like I told you, the Egyptians did not grow out their full beards. But if you look at the Israelite slaves, you can clearly see that they grew out their beards and they had full beards. And look at their locks. They have a whole bunch of twisted locks on their heads. And Pharaoh has some type of utensil meant to cut, and he's gonna cut off their hair because this tactic was practiced in a lot of the Israelites' captivities. Every time the Israelites went into a different slavery, every time they went into a different captivity, their oppressors would cut their hair off first to remove their power, because the black man's hair, the Israelites' hair, was always a significant source of their power. Basically, they would cut that power right off. The Europeans did the same to their slaves. Basically, this is a picture of a Hebrew that was sculpted during the Maccabee period, in the Maccabee era. If you read the book of Maccabees, it'll talk about how the Israelites were slaves in Greece for a period of time, and this is a depiction of an Israelite woman in captivity in Greece. As you can see, the nose is chopped off. Whenever you look at a statue of anyone anywhere on the planet, you would see, if the nose is chopped off, that indicates that that person is a Negro. Europeans don't normally want people to see that Negroes had anything of themselves. So what their tactic was just to chop the nose off, because the nose is a big sign that this person is a Negro or not. So they cut the nose off, and boom. But look at the locks. Look at those locks that they have. These Israelites with the locks in their heads. It kind of looks like they have rubber bands on the locks, but we know that they did not have rubber bands in Greece. So this must have been something else to band the locks in place. Um, let's get back to the scriptures talking about locks. Let's read the book of Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse 3, and it says, "And he put forth the form of an hand, and took me by a lock of mine head." So this is Ezekiel saying that he had locks. Let's get into more. Here is another depiction of the Israelites during the Assyrian exile, when they were exiled from the land of Assyria. As you can see, these Israelites do not have locks, but they still do have very matted up, very nappy hair on their heads. I mean, their hair is so nappy, nappier than any Negro I've seen. It looks like they haven't even combed their hair in their entire lives. I mean, look at this. They are drawing their BBs like very detailed, very circular, very round. I mean, whoever says the Israelites were Negro, I mean, whoever says the Israelites were Caucasian or of European descent, they obviously need to do more research. And these people who claim to be Jews, these Jewish people, are not the true Israelites, because the true Israelites did not look like them. These Jewish people descend from the Khazars of southern Russia and Germany. They are simply your average Caucasian. They are not Jews at all. Um, but as you can see Israelites being taken out of the land of Assyria by the Assyrian guards, and the Assyrian guard has a spear in his hand, and he's probably, using that to threaten them to get out of the land. As you can see, these Israelites are not clapping their hands. They are praying. They are praying to the Most High to be delivered out of the hand of these Assyrians. um they went into this captivity because they broke the commandments of the Most High. Every time the Israelites broke the commandments, they went into another captivity and another slavery. The first captivity was the Egyptian captivity, then the Philistinian captivity, then the Assyrian captivity. This is what this is. Then the Babylonian captivity, then the Greek captivity, then the Roman captivity. Then you have areas around in Africa where the Native Africans enslaved the Israelites. Then you had the sub-Saharan slave trade going on, and then you have great America. Even America had and has till this day the true Israelites in captivity. Bear with me if you're not understanding. This is another depiction of the Israelites in the exile. These people are drawn and illustrated exaggeratively as Negroes. I mean, it looks like they haven't even seen a comb in their life. I mean, look at their hair. It's like they just woke up and just freaking went to sleep and woke up and went to sleep and woke up and went to sleep and did not even bother touching their hair. It's crazy. But look at this. This is a book called The Ancient Black Hebrews. You can read this book. It goes much into depth. I've read it. It showed much archaeological evidence. It showed a lot of history. It shows a lot of things that a lot of people need to know about the Hebrews, because our children are taught that the people of the Bible were white with straight hair and all this crap, and they believed it, and people believed it even to the age of 80 and 90 years old, and they never seen the truth. This is why we must learn the truth about Black history. Um, this is more evidence. Moses was a black man, because if we read in the scriptures of Exodus 2 and 19, he was confused with an Egyptian. And we know that the Egyptians are obvious Negroes. As you can see right here, the Egyptians, hold up. Yes, the Egyptians depicted themselves as Negroes. On the right side is an illustration, and on the left side is a sculpture. So they look like just, regular Negroes, right? So if Moses was confused with the Egyptian in the land of Midian, if they thought he was an Egyptian, he must have been an obvious Negro. Come on, let's use context clues and common sense. Put two and two together, because this is how we find out things about life. Also, if we read Exodus chapter 4 and 6 through 7, the Most High was showing Moses a miracle by the burning bush. And the Most High turned Moses' hand white. Now, if Moses was already a white man, how can the Most High turn his hand white? That doesn't even make sense. His hand had to be a brown color. So we can read Job chapter 30 and 30. And Job says, my melanin is popping. In other words, he says, my skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. Do you understand? This is talking about your melanin here. Now, if we go to the book of Jeremiah 8 and 21, he clearly says, I am black. I need couture. He says, I am black. Now, if we go to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 14 and verse 2, it says, Judah mourneth. Okay, they are black like unto the ground. In the King James Version, it says they are black unto the ground. It doesn't say the word like unto the ground, but if you read the original Hebrew Tanakh version, it says they are black like unto the ground, meaning they are black in comparison to the ground. What color is the ground? The ground goes from a very light complexion to a very dark complexion. So this is the color of the original Jews. So Judah is the tribe of Judah, and these Judites are basically what Jews are. That's where the word Jew comes from. The original Jews, they are black like unto the ground. Many different shades of black. If you read Lamentations chapter 4 verse 8, Lamentations mean depressions, hard times. So Lamentations chapter 4 verse 8, their appearance is blacker than a coal. So their appearance was black. But why? If we read Lamentation chapter 5 verse 10, it says our skin was black like an oven. Now an oven for them was just burnt wood. So burnt wood, is that black? That's how black they were, because of the terrible famine. So in a famine, you don't supply your cells with enough nutrients. Therefore, they shrivel up. And when the cells of your body shrivel up, your skin will get darker. Because when your cells are happy, your when your I said happy, when your cells are healthy, they will inflate like a balloon. with water. But when they don't have enough nutrients, they will shrink and shrivel up and get much darker. Also, we have the Curses of Deuteronomy 28. If you are not familiar with the Curses of Deuteronomy 28, there is a video about it. The link to that video is in the description. Make sure you go watch this. Or you can just open up your video, or you can just open up your Bible. If you don't feel like watching another video, just open up your Bible, turn into the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verses 15 through 68, and you will find out who and where the true Israelites are today, if you don't already know. Now, if you do know, tell us in the comments. But the curses of Deuteronomy 28 are simply God telling the Israelites that they will be cursed with certain curses if they choose to break his commandments. This is why we must turn back to the Most High and keep his commandments, because these curses will sound very familiar if you were to read them. The curses include you won't have any good businesses in your community. That's verse 15. No, that's verse 16. The curses include it said basket in store. That means, curse shall be your basket in store. That's talking about your businesses. The curses include having your children sold unto your enemies. That's verse 20. That's verse 32. The curses include having a yoke of iron upon your neck. That's verse 48. The curses include working for your enemy all the time. Keep working for them. Never stop working for them. That's also verse 48. The curses include being sold to your enemies on slave ships as slave man and slave woman. That's verse 68. The curses include the men of the family, the fathers walking out on the children, and fathers not taking care of the children. I forgot what verse that was, but it's in there as well. The curses include many diseases on the Israelites. The curses include every single thing that happened to black people in history of America. So what am I trying to say? I'm simply saying that if your ancestors were a slave in America, if your ancestor was a slave in the Caribbean, if your ancestor was a slave in the UK or Nigeria or wherever you live, because the Israelites are scattered throughout the earth, throughout the four corners of the earth. That's what it said. The slave ships didn't just go to America. The slave ships went freaking everywhere. You had slave ships going to India. You had slave ships going to Arabia. You had slave ships going to UK. And most of them went to Brazil, and only a few came to America. So if your ancestors are a slave, then you're Israelite, period. That's just how it was. So with that, I would like to say, Shalom, family, peace, and blessings.